So, the topic for our talk today is influence. Now, we hear a lot about the word influence and influencers today. It's a very important word, a buzzword that's out there. But what connection does it have with our teaching and with our students in the classroom? Well, we're going to come on to that and talk about that in more detail as the session goes on. But first of all, I just want to look at what life is like for teenagers today. When I started preparing this seminar, it was going to be for a face-to-face seminar. It's changed a bit since then for obvious reasons. But back in February, when I started looking into it, I was thinking about the world for teenagers. And it's actually quite a depressing place. There's lots of bad stuff in the news about terrorism, about migrants, people being displaced, about climate change and disappearing habitats. And I think a lot of young people are concerned about their future and what prospects they will have when they come to looking for work. So it's quite a difficult time to be a teenager. And that was in February. That was before this came along. Obviously, the last months and weeks have brought whole new challenges to our society and to the life of teenagers we work with. They may be personally affected, their families may have been affected by illness or by economic problems. All of them will have had their education turned upside down and be coping with the demands and challenges that they experience as online learners, struggling often for Wi-Fi or devices at home. This is all very hard for them, and it makes the world an even more frightening and difficult place where they're not quite sure what's round the corner for them. Unfortunately, also, this has brought with it a lot of bad news. Statistics show that 90% of news coverage is bad news. That's terrible. It just adds to all this angst that is building up. And unfortunately, human beings being what they are, we tend to click on the bad news more than we click on the good. So all of this means that the teenagers we work with, the young people who are in our charge, are at an unprecedentedly difficult and challenging time. And I feel that as educators, we need to help them feel more positive about their future and help them feel that they have the opportunity to influence what happens going forward. It's not all bad news, and I think it's very important that we keep our students aware of the positive things. For example, 35% of the world's population now is under 20. Young people have never had such an opportunity to influence the world. They have never had a bigger voice. Poverty is clearly still a big problem in the world, with massive unfairness in the way that resources are distributed in the world. But global poverty has fallen quite dramatically in recent years. Newer generations tend to be healthier than we were in the past. They smoke less, they drink less, they're more informed about health and diet, so generally they have a healthier outlook on life. And internet gives new opportunities for people to access education in a way that they have never been able to before. So these are all positive things that we need to keep at the forefront of our students' minds. It's also very important that our students have positive role models. Here are some examples. If we start at the top left, Boyan Slat is a young Dutch entrepreneur, and he's invented a device to clean the oceans. It's a type of filter to remove plastic from the sea. At the top left, we can see Emma Gonzalez. Emma Gonzalez didn't start out to be an influencer of any kind. Unfortunately, she was one of the students at Parkland High School in the United States, where there was an incident of gun violence, a school shooting. And following that, she and other classmates set up a movement to March for Our Lives, with massive protests across the United States. And she continues to campaign for gun control. Malala Yousafzai, herself a victim of violence, turned her experience round to become somebody working to ensure that young women and girls got an opportunity to have education. And the last person in our slide here, Greta Thunberg, hardly needs any introduction. Very few people can have galvanized a generation to go out and protest the way that she did. So these are the type of role models that are good for our students to see and make them feel positive about the world, make them feel that they have an opportunity to influence things. But what do you need to be an influencer? I think there are three things. First, you need to have something to say. Second, you need to be who you are. Be true to yourself. And thirdly, you need to know how to say it. If we look at the example of Greta Thunberg, she very clearly has something to say. She has something she's passionate about. She is very definitely who she is. She hasn't changed her hair, her clothes, the way she looks. She is true to herself. But also, she really knows how to say it. She's very articulate when speaking in public and also on social media. And that's why she is a great influencer. So what if we can take these skills into our classrooms and help our students have the tools that they need to influence their future? What we're going to look at are these three areas and how they can become part of our classroom. The first thing then is have something to say. And now it's your turn to say something. Let's have a look at these first issues here. When you think about your students, and for now I want you to think about your students when they're speaking in Spanish. Don't worry about English at this point. Would you say that your students, A, have clear ideas about big issues, B, that they have some ideas but perhaps can't articulate them, or C, do you feel that your students don't yet have a lot to say about big issues? So what I'd like you to do now is to cast your vote A, B, or C. You have a few minutes to do this.
Yes. Well, we'll give people probably about 10 or 15 seconds because it's a poll and it's just clicking one of the answers and the answers are coming in. It seems like a majority are saying B. My students have some ideas but can't articulate them too well. That's at 92%, followed by, well, it's neck and neck, A and C. My students have clear ideas about big issues, and C, to be honest, my students don't have a lot to say about big issues. So clearly fantastic. A majority are saying B. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Such an overwhelming agreement that most of your students fall into category B. However, I think whichever group your students fall into, and probably in a typical class, you've got some students who are A, maybe the majority are B, but you maybe also have some who are C as well. So we need to think about all these students. If your students have clear ideas about big issues, then they need a chance to express themselves. So we need to give them that opportunity. If your students have some ideas but can't articulate them too well, which is obviously the case for the majority of you, then we need to help them to develop those ideas and to express them. And if your students don't yet have a lot to say, then we need to get them starting thinking about the big issues. start them thinking about the things that matter. So we're going to look at some ways that we can help our students take their ideas, develop their ideas, and have the opportunity to talk about them. One way that we can do this is by using engaging topical texts. Now here we've got an example. We can see it's a text about digital do's and digital don'ts. So it's content that is of interest to teenagers. It talks about cybersecurity, being safe online, posting, and so on. But you can also see that the design of the text is very attractive. The text itself is in shorter sections, which is always a good idea because it makes students feel less overwhelmed by a big text. And it's also very attractive to look at with a kind of infographic style. So this is a type of text that is going to encourage our students to get involved and to speak. Here's another example. Now, we've heard a lot in the news in the last few weeks about fake news, about swallowing disinfectant to cure coronavirus and things like that. I don't think fake news has ever been a bigger story. And here we have another reading text. So again, a very topical text. And we can see a very attractive layout with different parts of the text annotated and highlighted. So these texts are designed to help students have something to say and to have their say. Moving on, it's important also that we help our students develop critical thinking. They're going to have more to say and more scope to develop what they want to say if they can reflect critically on the text that they read. For example, in the case of the fake news text, we can ask students first to understand the text, going back to remember what the content was. Then we can ask them to analyze it. Fake news was in fact chosen as a word of the year by a British dictionary publisher. Why was that? Why is it such an important thing today? Those are useful questions to get our students thinking about. And thirdly, we can ask them to evaluate what could be the consequences of fake news. Does it happen in your country? So these type of critical thinking skills will give our students more to say. Another way we can help our students get their ideas out there is to use driving questions. I'm just going to give you a few seconds to read the definitions. So a driving question is the type of question you might ask your students at the start of a unit of study, a series of lessons. The kind of question you would ask and then help them follow through in the coming classes until they can bring their ideas together. Let's look at some examples. Here are some driving questions we use in Influence. At the top, they start with lower level, with questions that would be more appropriate for primero de eso. And as they go down the slide, they become more sophisticated for higher levels. But you can see, if we look at the third line from the bottom, can sport be a force for good? Well, in a course, but we're used to seeing a unit which talks about sport. But here we're asking a bigger question about it. So obviously, yes, we will do the vocabulary that the students need. We will give them a chance to talk about their own sporting activities. But we will also ask a bigger question about sport. Can it be a force for good? Let's see how we use driving questions through a unit. Here we have a double page spread at the start of a unit. And if you look at the top left-hand page, you'll see WDYT. That stands for, what do you think? And that's where we ask our driving question. In the case of this unit, the question is, what is your idea of success? And throughout the unit, we help students gather their ideas and their ability to communicate in answer to that question. So we start off with some language on achievements, like get good grades, pass your exams, win a competition. Moving on to the next page, we can see a reading text, which is all about 3 successful brands. And as you can see, they're brands that teenagers would be very familiar with: Instagram, Vans, and Polaroid. But it continues to explore the theme of success. Further on in the unit, we look at some word building. So we have words like invent, invention, compete, competition. And on the right-hand side of this page, we can see a listening where a student gives a presentation about 5 girls who won a competition on robotics. The interesting thing is that these girls live in Afghanistan. So it's a very inspirational model for students to hear and listen about. On our final page of the unit, we have a project page. And here at the top left, again, we can see our driving question. What do you think? What is your idea of success? And the task for the students is to make an infographic about a success story, which could either be an individual person or an organization. And on the right-hand side, we can see a model project, an example of an infographic, giving a profile of a Paralympic athlete. So here the students can bring together their ideas about what is success that they have accumulated through the unit. Okay, so moving on now, the next area I want to look at is be who you are. Students need to realize that everyone and anyone can have influence today. It's not limited to a few people, and I think it's never been more clear how influential teenagers can be if we look at some of the events and activities and mobilization of teenagers in the past couple of years. But it's also very important that we give our students models to inspire them. But I don't mean celebrities. I'm not talking here about becoming famous. I'm talking about being an ordinary person doing an extraordinary thing. And here's an example. I'd like you just to read this short text. As you can see, there are some gaps, but don't worry about those. Just take a moment to read it. So this is a text which is designed to provide grammar practice. In fact, it's a consolidation of grammar that students, grammar and vocabulary that students have seen in recent units. So they fill in the gaps. Yash Gupta lives in Los Angeles. He started wearing glasses when he was 5 years old, etc. But it's not just a grammar practice text. It's also an inspirational text about what an ordinary high school student did, which has helped thousands of children to see. But it's a very ordinary story. It's something which is accessible for our students. Okay, moving on, it's important to remember that when we teach our classes, we're in fact teaching a group of individuals. So if we want our students to be who they are, we have to recognize that they are different. And one way that we can address this is by helping them with mixed ability tasks. Here we have 2 examples from our grammar boot camp. I can't say that one, our BAMA group camp, our grammar boot camp, which you find at the back of the book. And here we can see that both groups of students, those who need some reinforcement and those who need greater challenge, are catered for. So if the students need to have a bit more practice, then we have a slightly easier exercise for them, where they only have to insert verbs into sentences, and they only have 6 choices. The students who require a bit more challenge have to look at a text, not at sentences. And they also have 10 verbs to choose from. So immediately it's a more challenging activity for them. But there are other ways that we can cater for individuals in our classes. Now, generally speaking, certain students in your classes will be good at English, and they'll be the ones putting up their hands and answering the questions. So it probably doesn't feel quite so good if you're one of the others, one who doesn't get to answer quite so much. We're going to look at a couple of activities that may enable different students to have their moment in the classroom. Here we've got a puzzle. All the mammoths were in a line. 2 mammoths were in front of a mammoth. 2 mammoths were behind a mammoth. And there was a mammoth in the middle. What is the smallest possible number of mammoths? Just take a moment or two to decide your answer. Now, if you're thinking it's 5, you're wrong. All the mammoths were in a line. 2 mammoths were in front of a mammoth. And 2 mammoths were behind a mammoth. And there was a mammoth in the middle. So the smallest possible number of mammoths is 3. Now you've got thinking about puzzles, I've got another one for you, and this time you're going to write your answer. Here's the puzzle. Jimmy and Jenny have lots of hobbies. They like swimming and they both like collecting things. They don't like sport or drawing. Jimmy loves sleeping and Jenny likes chess. Now here's my question for you, and I want you to write in your answer. Do they like taking photos? Why or why not? Okay, now's your time to write in your answers.
Okay, so again, we'll give you, well, a couple of seconds, 10 or 15 seconds to write in your answers. Do you think that they like taking photos? And why or why not? It's a good teaser, eh?
It is, it is.
Yes, it's got me going as well. I
Aha.
want to say something, but I won't for the
Well, you
moment.
just wait for a moment, Louise. Give other people a chance.
Okay, I know. It's what would happen in a class, wouldn't it? There would always be one who says it before the others, or before the others have had a chance to
Okay,
think.
we've got answers coming in now, and a lot of people are saying yes. Somebody says no clue. Somebody says yes, as they
Yes.
like collecting things. Okay,
Hmm.
lots of answers. Excellent. Well, I'm going to put you out of your misery and tell you the answer now. Listen, Jimmy, double M, and Jenny, double N, have lots of hobbies, double B. They like swimming, double M, and they both like collecting things, double L. They don't like sport, no double letter, or drawing, no double letter. Jimmy loves sleeping and Jenny likes chess, double letters in each. So in answer to the question, do they like taking photos? The answer is no, because there are no double letters in the word photos. Now, this is
Ah,
interesting because you are all language teachers and you're good at languages, but maybe you're not quite so good at maths and logic. The idea of using puzzles in the classroom is twofold. On the one hand, we're using the puzzles to give examples of language, in this case, like and dislike. But at the same time, we're giving an opportunity for students with a more mathematical or logical brain to be the ones to get the answers right. And imagine if you're that person who doesn't normally get to answer the question, and this is your moment. Think how great that would feel. Okay, we're going to move on now, and we're going to move on to looking at our last section today, which is know how to say it. And I'm going to ask another question here. Imagine you go into class and you say, "Good morning, class. I want you to write a dialogue planning a day out." Why could students find this activity difficult? Can you write your answers?
okay. So again, we'll give you about 10 or 15 seconds. Just write keywords, short answers to the question, why might students find this particular activity difficult? The activity is good morning class. Well, that you want them to write a dialogue, planning a day out. So there's an answer. No brainstorming. There's
Good
no
answer.
time to think. No
No
guideline.
guideline, very
No
open
model.
task.
They need
Exactly.
a model.
Fantastic.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. These were the answers that I was thinking of. Because I think in order to do this type of task, students need three things. First of all, they need ideas. They need something to say. Then they need the language to say it. And finally, we need to break the task down into easy steps so they do one thing at a time. Let's have a look at an example. On the left-hand side, we can see the student's book page. You can't see it in all detail here, but to the left, they've got a model conversation. And then on the right-hand side, we have this box. And I've enlarged the box for you on the right. This is the skills boost box. In the first step, they think. They think of a place to visit. They research how much it costs to get in, how you get there, whether you can have lunch. So they're generating the ideas that they need. After that, they prepare a dialogue, but in order to do that, we need to give them some language support. And if you look in the center of your screen, you can see a box that says key phrases. And it's phrases for making suggestions and responding to suggestions. The next step is that they practice. And they practice before they perform. So we can see we've got our ideas, we've got our language, and we've got our task broken into easy steps. So that's one way that we can help students. Another way is to help them pull ideas together. For example, if they're going to do a project at the end of the unit about a driving question, then it may be helpful that we bring together the different elements they've seen in the unit that can inform them. And if we're going to ask them to produce a different type of output, like a questionnaire or a survey or an infographic, it's important that we support them in doing that. And here are some examples of how to write a questionnaire. It's also really important, if our students are going to know how to say things, that they have 21st century skills. Those are things like collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. They're really, really important skills for the modern world. So here we can see on the left an example of getting students to practice collaboration skills, working together to achieve their goals. We give them some tips. They need to take turns. They need to make sure everyone participates. And then we give them some phrases so they have the language to do these things effectively. And finally, one more thing we can do to help our students is to give them clear models. Here's an example of a project where the students produce a map of their local area. It's an annotated map where they write information about what there is to see and do. This is very useful because it gives the students a clear guide of what's expected. But another thing that's very helpful here is to show them a video. And I'm going to show you the video that goes with this project now.
Hello. So, this is a map of our town Poole. Poole is a town on the south coast of England. Poole is a small town, but there are lots of cool things to do, and it's a great place for teenagers to live in. First, if you're looking for a place to hang out with your friends, there's a really nice park called Poole Park, which has a juice bar and a big lake. It's a great place on a sunny day.
Or if you prefer a place where you can do exercise, there's another cool park by the sea called Beta Park. There's a skate park, and I love going skateboarding there with my friends at the weekend. On a rainy day, you can go to the Lighthouse, which is a cinema and art centre. Poole has also got many cheap places to eat. Take a bus and go to Tower Park. There are lots of fast food restaurants there.
So, this is our town. What do you think of it?
So we can see that having a model provides the students with a really clear idea of what is expected of them. And it also helps you as teachers know what the final result could look like. So, we've talked about different types of influencers. There are many types. There are the types we see on social media, the kind of people who post content and maybe draw people to buy particular products. I'm not really interested in that type of influencer. More important for me is this type of influencer, the influencers of the world that they live in and the world that they are going to live in, our students. But there's one very important person missing in this photograph, because all of us as educators are also extremely important influencers. As it says here, an influencer is also a person who inspires or guides the actions of others. And we can do this with our students by helping them have something to say, be who they are, and know how to say it. I think it's really important for students to realize that you don't have to be big. You don't have to start big to be an influencer. You can actually start quite small. And here's a great example of someone who did that. Thank you very much. That's the end of my talk. If you'd like to ask any questions, now's the time to send them in.
Okay, so again, we'll give you 10 or 15 seconds to send in any questions or comments that you have. I would like to thank you, Kate, for a really excellent talk. It's very inspiring. I like the way you framed it with those three key areas and the examples that you showed. And I think I really appreciated the kind of scaffolding and guidance, which is the role now of an educator, to guide students through
Absolutely.
these topics. And you showed that really clearly, and I think have made it very accessible both to the teachers and the students. We'll see now if there are any comments. Yes, well, there are a lot of people saying, just thanks a lot. It was really interesting. Thank you very much. Thanks a million. Thanks for this inspiring talk at such a complicated time for teenagers.
I think that's a really
everyone.
important point as well, because these times are extraordinary times. None of us have ever lived through anything like it. And I think, our students are going to come back to class as different people. Society is not the same as what it was. And I think we need to be a positive force for our students, a positive support for our students, not only in terms of language learning, but also in helping them feel good about the world they live in.
Absolutely. And I just want to reiterate that there will be a handout, a summary of the key points and ideas of this talk and of the second speaker's talk. This will be sent to you in about 1 week's time, along with the certificate of attendance and a link to the recording of today's event so that you can watch the talks again. So great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kate, for this very inspiring talk. It's been a real pleasure to spend these 30 minutes or so with you. Thank you for sharing your ideas with us. And thank you to everybody for participating in the interactions and the polls and the have you says. Yeah. We'll take a very, very short break now. We'll put on a video of the latest Macmillan courses for ESO and Bachillerato. Don't go away. Please don't go away. We'll be back with our second speaker, Skye Hedstrom, after this very short break. Thanks
very much. Bye-bye.